Our top story right now involves the criminal evidence against the sitting president of the United States and a newly aggressive push by the top Democrat in charge of this probe, House Judiciary Chairman Jerry Nadler. Democrats return from their recess pursuing several different avenues for the potential impeachment of Donald Trump. And while party leaders continue to stress that they are investigating before reaching final decisions, today the man in charge of what Democrats call now an impeachment probe says this: Donald Trump ought to be impeached.
We are concentrating our resources on determining whether to impeach the president. Personally, I think the president ought to be impeached. Now I'm talking in my personal opinion. My personal opinion, impeachment is imperative, not because he's going to be removed from office. The Senate won't do that. But because we have to vindicate the Constitution, and we have to make sure that the next president or the one after him or her knows there's a real penalty to be paid. That's why the impeachment is necessary, even if we cannot get a vote in the Senate.
What you're hearing is significant. You're hearing the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, second only to the House Speaker on this issue, saying publicly and unequivocally Donald Trump should be impeached. So now the person running this impeachment probe, who can call the vote which sets up ever bringing potential articles of impeachment to the floor, is saying that's exactly what should happen. And let's be clear, because context matters. This is not how Chairman Nadler always spoke. He used to say impeachment was basically a maybe.
Why haven't you opened an impeachment inquiry? Or, in fairness, is that what you're doing right now?
I don't think we're doing that. We may get to that. We may not. I don't want to make it sound as if we're heading for impeachment.
Yeah.
Probably we're not.
So as recently as May, Chairman Nadler was telling everyone we probably were not heading for impeachment. And that recent historical context is what makes this new public statement pretty striking.
Personally, I think the president ought to be impeached. We have our hands full with impeaching the president right now. We have to vindicate the Constitution. Leading the president to become more and more of a tyrant cannot be tolerated. That's why the impeachment is necessary.
Tyrant, impeachment, we're doing it. This is necessary. This is what you're hearing from the person running this. This is why, although Donald Trump has ideas about what should be in the news, and frankly, they're all politicians, sometimes Speaker Pelosi has ideas about moving some of this off or away or delayed, Chairman Nadler's out here telling you this. And other investigators are also jumping in right now. News tonight. The top prosecutor in New York, the Manhattan DA, subpoenaing 8 years of Donald Trump's tax returns. And an investigator inside the Trump administration is now flagging a whistleblower complaint that Trump's intel chief is allegedly hiding. We only know about this tonight because of an urgent warning from Intel Chairman Adam Schiff, stating that Trump's top intelligence official is refusing to follow the law that requires he share this credible whistleblower warning, which was deemed an urgent concern by their own inspector general. Basically, that's their internal watchdog. Schiff is now dialing it up, issuing a new subpoena to get the complaint and stating the alleged misconduct appears to involve Trump and/or other senior White House or administration officials. This is not normal push and pull stuff in government. This isn't normal at all when you take it together. A local prosecutor trying to pry loose the president's long hidden tax returns. The Judiciary Chair saying it's time to impeach the sitting president after long saying he wasn't there yet. The Intel Chair saying Trump's Intel chief is hiding a whistleblower complaint contrary to the law and that this has never happened before. And this national security whistleblower, again, this is not some scandal emanating from Congress seeking investigations. To paraphrase Billy Joel, Adam Schiff didn't start this fire. It was already burning when he found the Intel director trying to hide it, potentially illegally. And that leads us to Schiff's ringing this big alarm bell about how high this could go.
The director has said essentially that he is answering to a higher authority and refusing to turn over the whistleblower complaint. I think it's fair to assume this involves either the president or people around him or both.
If that's true, and that's why the administration's hiding what it's supposed to fork over, that would be huge. Now, if this potentially explosive claim sounds vague, I want to be clear that's because it is. No one has the underlying complaint. We don't have it in our newsroom. Chairman Schiff doesn't have it. So no one knows if the complaint does involve the top officials or the president, or if its allegations are verifiable. Now, as Democratic chairs are beating all these drums, how are Republicans on the Hill reacting? Well, not very calmly tonight. In fact, over the weekend, a member of Republican leadership sought this moment as Nadler moves towards impeachment, as the administration has this other national security allegation, potentially a scandal, uses this moment to claim that the FBI almost staged a coup against Trump, and the FBI official who led the Russia probe should be indicted and jailed. It's that same old call to investigate the investigators.
We came the closest ever to this country having a coup, and now we need accountability.
Andrew McCabe, they are recommending charging an indictment here. Will we see an indictment?
We will see an indictment. In the end, I do not believe Jim Comey will get off. Anyone that has had any association with trying to create this coup should be held accountable.
We begin with former DNC chair, Vermont Governor, and Dr. Howard Dean and Rutgers University professor Brittany Cooper. Good to see both of you. Governor Dean, how do you see it all in context and that rather ferocious pushback?
This is actually fascinating because you and I had an argument about this about 6 months ago on this show. And at the time, I was very much in Pelosi's corner. The facts, I said we need the facts. We still need facts. But the preponderance of the evidence is this president is a crook. And we didn't talk about the Air Force scandal, using the Air Force to funnel money to Donald Trump through his resort in Scotland and puffing up the air base in Scotland that will benefit his resort, hiding intelligence information from the people who are entrusted in the Constitution to get it. And not to mention all the chicanery that's been going on for a long time. So my view on this is the evidence is just building so that you have to bring this stuff out in the open. And if the impeachment inquiry is the only thing you can do it, it has to be done. This administration is a cesspool. This is the most corrupt president we have had in the history of the United States. And that's saying something if you go back to Warren Harding. So we have no choice but to find out what the facts are. The president is stonewalled at every turn. The only way to do this, I think, is through an impeachment proceeding.
What does it tell you that the person in charge of the impeachment probe says, I mean, this is not just everyday stuff, says it's time to impeach the tyrant in the Oval Office?
Yeah, I think that there are two things going on. The first is there is no coup, and we shouldn't be, misdirected by all of the hysteria on the right. But also, part of what Nadler, I think, is finally getting on board with is that there is something to being accountable to the American people. And so we have an election coming up next year. The American people put a blue wave in office in order to make sure that this president would be held accountable. He has broken every norm. He breaks laws all the time. He was sharing confidential intel on Twitter just 2 weeks ago. There is literally nothing that this man won't do in service of his own interests, including putting people, our service folks, our Congress people, everyone who cares about American democracy at risk. And because of that, I think that Nadler is saying, I want you to know that I have resolved this, because that then creates the context for other people to get on board, because it means that he has looked at some of the evidence, if not all. He sees the larger picture, and he is trying to now lead us in that way. And we're long overdue for that leadership. Frankly, they're behind the step of the American people. And so now it's time to get out front and lead the charge. What do you think of what Adam Schiff is trying to do here?
Now, look, Adam Schiff is a really smart, well-educated lawyer. He knows exactly what he's doing. The administration is illegally concealing information from his committee, which is an incredibly important committee. It's responsible for the security of the United States of America.
Yeah, and let me press you on that, because this is important. People say, do the guardrails work? And this is one of those guardrails that is supposed to work. According to Schiff, this has literally never been violated before. That if someone has a complaint in Intel where the things are supposed to be classified, they can go to the IG, the internal watchdog. And this watchdog deems it credible, and that's how Congress is alerted. And then the administration steps in and says, no one can know about what is credibly accused.
You know, I remember Hillary Clinton spending 11 hours in front of this committee when it was run by some guy from South Carolina who was a Republican and had a Republican majority. If we can investigate emails that turned out to be nothing for 11 hours of Hillary Clinton's time, we can damn well hear from this president, who's, again, the most corrupt president in the history of the United States of America. I don't think this is, my initial reaction was the same as the speaker's. Let's not go off half-cocked. Let's not go too far. We now know the evidence. If we're having impeachment hearings at the time of the election, it displays the corruption of the Trump family and the Republican Party's enabling of that, right, so people can vote on it. And let them vote on whether they think Trump is corrupt and they want somebody who's corrupt in the White House.
So let me take it to you on the political science of it then, which is we just had a debate where we heard from many of the top Democrats running for president.
Yeah.
They didn't use those platforms to speak about the I word. They didn't press Pelosi.
Right.
They were going in a different direction. Does that surprise you? Because on the right, on the Republican side, talking about criminalization or strong mechanisms, whatever they may be, is pretty popular. It seems that the Dems aren't doing that out on the trail.
Yeah, because I think that they have bought into this idea that people don't want this, that they don't want Americans to be divisive. But this is a man who has us on the brink of a war with Iran. We've spent a couple of years being on the brink of a war with North Korea. Part of what we elect Congress people to do is to protect the integrity of the Constitution and to provide leadership. They have access to information the American public does not have. And in prior impeachment inquiries, the public was never on board with Clinton, I think maybe for good reason. But they have to build the kind of consensus that we need in order to go forward with this.
Yeah, I'm going to turn to another one of our experts. I want to thank both you, Brittany Cooper and Governor Howard Dean, for kicking us off. Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.